My name's Jocelyn Ramirez. I'm the chef and founder of Todo Verde here in Los Angeles that I started back in 2015 because I wanted to be able to create plant-based versions of the things that I grew up eating. Not that I grew up eating a strawberry rose cake often, in fact, not at all, but we, over the years, developed a agua fresca that we call our Amorcito, and it is a strawberry rose base. It's one that we made at the farmer's market because strawberries were in season and I knew I wanted to make an agua fresca with them. And one of our farmers was like, here, take a bunch of strawberries and mess around and see, maybe you can make a strawberry lemonade. And then I was like, what about rose, strawberry rose? That sounds like it could be really good. And it's been the number one thing that we sell, like the strawberry rose agua fresca. If we showed up to any event in LA without that thing, people were like, where is it? You didn't bring it, you know? So it's just become a part of the flavor profile that people associate with Todo Verde. And I've made strawberry rose tamales, strawberry rose milk tea, strawberry rose cake, strawberry rose everything. It's just such a perfect pairing together. For folks who haven't really played around with rose, it's very potent. So a little bit goes a long way. We're going to be using for today's recipe rose water, and I'm using Cortas. It's the brand that I typically use. And it is very potent. It's kind of like lavender oil, essentially. It's like this very potent, what's the word? Not consolidated, condensed, something, where it's essentially a lot in a, you know, every drop has so much potency to it. And then I am going to be using some edible rose petals that I bought from an Indian store near me. You can pick these up usually at Middle Eastern stores or Indian stores, and they're food grade dried rose petals. I don't typically, oh, I just made a mess here. I don't typically recommend just getting rose petals from your yard. I get that question a lot, like, can I just get roses from my yard and dry the petals and then eat it? The answer to that is no, unless you know that your plant is like food grade organic. A lot of times roses have a ton of pesticides in them and you don't want to be eating that. So you want to purchase something that you know is food grade, or if you know your plant for sure is free and clear of all those additives and pesticides, so that you don't end up eating that. So we are going to get started with our recipe. And for folks who are cooking along, I've already done a few things. Like I've already measured out all of the ingredients that we're going to be using. I like to do that just so I can focus on leading the class and not necessarily trying to like scoop out and measure everything during the class itself. So I've already done that. I've already quartered my strawberries, measured them out. We are going to get started with this strawberry syrup, essentially, that we're going to make kind of like a strawberry jam, a very loose strawberry jam that we're going to use in the cake batter. So we're going to do 1 cup of fresh strawberries that are going to go in the batter, just straight up. You can dice, you can quarter the strawberries. Quartering is fine. And then 2 cups of strawberries that are going to go in a small pot with the sugar. And we're going to just let that cook down as we get our other ingredients ready. So we're going to use that small pot twice. So after you make this syrup, just keep the pot there, and we're going to use it again to make the syrup that we need for the frosting. So in a like awesome case scenario, I would have already measured out, which I didn't do, how much of the strawberry syrup you end up with for this first round. If anybody wants to measure it, feel free to, because then we could make the both batches together and then just measure out what you need for the batter and measure out what you need for the frosting. But I didn't do that. So we're going to do 2 steps, same pot. So you don't have to clean up extra stuff. It's going to be totally fine. Okay. So any questions so far? Are we good to get started, everyone? Yes? Okay. I think so. All right, so for our first step in our pot, we are going to add our 2 cups of strawberries. And all I did was I just cut the tops off the strawberries, gave them a rinse, and just quarter them. It doesn't have to be super beautiful, fancy dicing. It's gonna get all mushy and cooked down. So it doesn't have to be super precise in your chopping down of your strawberries. So I'm gonna add these 2 cups of strawberries to a small pot that I have on my stove. And I'm going to add some sugar. I have here, and I'm looking at my list just to make sure I always give the exact amounts. I have 1 1/4 cup of raw turbinado sugar. Now this is my preferred sugar that I used here at home. If you have white sugar, maybe start with just a cup and see how sweet your sugar ends up being. This, because it is more textured, there's, you know, air in between like the different little pieces of the crystallized sugar. But this is my preferred sugar for home, a raw turbinado sugar. It's 1 1/4 cup. It seems like quite a bit, but you definitely do want to get that nice sweetness. And it's a cake, so it's supposed to be a treat. It's not something that you eat every day, hopefully. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and drop this sugar into the pot with the strawberries. I'll just sprinkle that on there. And then I'm going to turn on the heat to like a medium low, and I'm gonna just keep my eye on it. You want the sugar to melt. The strawberries on the bottom, they're gonna provide a little bit of that liquid to help cook down the sugar. And you're going to make a more sugar heavy, obviously, jam, but it's gonna infuse the strawberry flavor. And so we're gonna just let that go for the next 10, 15 minutes or so. And then once that starts to cook down, then we'll just drop in our strawberry powder, our dehydrated strawberries, which I'm going to talk about right now. Let me put a little lid on this, just a jar, just to try to not have too much of that evaporate and just really have it melt down. So a medium, low, a heat that you can control without feeling like you have to be here every second. If you start to see that it's getting a little too thick or it's starting to stick to the bottom, drop the heat down, just keep an eye on it. Again, you're just trying to get everything to like melt and meld together. You don't want to create like a super hard caramel sauce. You don't want it to overcook. I'm gonna grab a bag of dehydrated strawberries so you can just see what I'm working with here. So I'm gonna come back here. So these dehydrated strawberries, or freeze-dried strawberries, I should say, you can pick up at almost any grocery store nowadays. Especially health food stores. And I've used this for tons of desserts for Todo Verde, like our cacao pudding. I would crumble it or blend it into a powder like this, and then sprinkle it over the cacao pudding. It's super delicious. And if you've never had these before, they're just strawberries that have completely ripened. And so they're super sweet, super fragrant. And they're just little sliced pieces of strawberry. So you can see here, little freeze-dried pieces of strawberry. So if you've never, used this before, it's kind of similar to like, if you've ever had like that Circle K cereal, like this is what's in there. And it's like little broken pieces of strawberries. When you add the milk, they kind of rehydrate, and it's very, very potent in the flavor of strawberry. Now, the reason we're adding this here is because this is gonna give a very, very prominent flavor to the cake that is like very clear. This is strawberry cake. And you want to break it up just so it really infuses into all the areas of the batter versus having like little clumps of like, this tastes like strawberry, this tastes like strawberry. So all I did was I added, I just did a couple bags. I threw a couple bags in my blender and just blitzed it until it became a powder. I have a Vitamix, and it's really, really quick. And I just have it in a deli cup, and I just scoop out as I need, 2 tablespoons, a tablespoon, whatever it is. So you can add maybe about a cup or so into your blender, blend it up. You're probably gonna need more than a cup. I would say I would just throw in like a whole bag of this into your blender, because it's gonna blend down significantly, and it's gonna be a very minimal amount of powder. So I should have done that, and here's the disclaimer that I didn't say at the beginning. I'm not a baker. I always like disclaimer, I'm not a baker. It's fun for me, but I'm a chef like on the savory side, not a pastry chef. And so these like whole grams and all these things beforehand is like not, I am a person who likes to like feel it out and cook and add and do all these things. And with baking, you have to be so precise. So it's really tricky for me to be like that on top of it. So I apologize for not having an exact amount before, but I would say about a bag would probably translate to what you need for this recipe. So you're going to end up, go ahead.
Really quickly, can you just repeat the steps that you did previously for the folks who hopped in a little late?
Absolutely. Okay, so right now, what we've done so far is we have our strawberries. We have 2 cups of our strawberries that were just like chopped up, quartered, however, it doesn't need to be fancy. 2 cups of strawberries went into my pot, and then I threw on 1 1/4 cups of raw turbinado sugar. If you're using white sugar, you can use maybe a cup and see your sweet level once the batter is complete to see if maybe perhaps you need a little bit more sugar. And that is on a medium low temperature right now, and it's slowly cooking down. We can actually, I'll take a look at it right now. I'm going to bring my spatula in here, and you can see that I'm starting to melt some of the sugar here. I'm going to check to make sure I'm not getting any sticking happening. It's melting down. I'm getting a tiny little bit of sticking here with my strawberries. So I'm just gonna lower my temperature slightly. So I'm like in between, right smack in the middle of like medium and low. So if your thing goes up to like 6, I'm probably like a 2 or something like that on your dial. And so you can see here that it's starting to become this like nice syrupy texture. You can still see the crystals on my spatula there, like the sugar hasn't completely melted down. I want the sugar to completely melt down, and I also want my strawberries to break down even further. Now, it's not gonna be like completely broken down. Like you could throw this in the blender and break it down all the way. I actually do have a hand blender, but I'm gonna use that for the frosting because I don't wanna see big chunks of strawberries in my frosting. But I don't mind the slightly larger chunks in the batter. I don't mind kind of as I bite throughout the cake, me getting, you know, biting into like a piece of cooked strawberry that's nice and sweet and delicious. I think that that's a bonus for me. But if you don't like that texture play in your cakes, you can absolutely blend this smooth so that when you add it to the batter, you don't have any pieces in there. So I'm just gonna let that keep going. Again, I'm gonna set my lid on there, slightly ajar, let it breathe, but I don't want a lot of evaporation to happen. And in fact, I might've turned it down a little too low. I'm gonna turn it up just slightly. I wanna see it bubbling, but I don't wanna see it over boiling. I wanna see that little simmer going, that melding happening, but I don't want it to overcook and burn. So I'm gonna let that keep going. I'm gonna come back over here. And then we were talking about our freeze-dried strawberries. We threw in a whole bag into a blender and blended until you get this powder. And that is gonna end up going into our strawberry sugar mixture. So it's gonna create like a really potent, very flavorful, strawberry-centric sauce, essentially, that's gonna flavor the batter. One thing I will say is I tried to create a shortcut this morning. So I made a cake last night, and I made the frosting for that cake this morning. And I was like, let me just try again, disclaimer, I am not a baker. I was like, let me try a shortcut, because usually I do the strawberry and the sugar, cooking it by itself. And then once it's cooked down, I add in other things. And I was like, let me try adding for the frosting, the coconut oil, the strawberry powder, and the butter, and just like let it all go so I can do other things. And this strawberry powder clumps, it's stuck to the bottom because it's dehydrated. It's like sucking in liquid, and it didn't make an ideal frosting. I still saved it. It's not the best frosting I've ever made, but it still tastes delicious. So just go the step by step. Don't do what I did this morning. Just do the strawberries and the sugar. Once that's done, then we'll throw this in as more of a flavoring. It doesn't really need to get cooked down per se, because it's already so lacking liquid. It's so dry. And so we'll leave that until the end and hit it with that extra additional flavor. So let's get into
how much the measurements would be for turbinado versus like a regular white sugar?
Yeah, so we talked about that a little bit. So I would add about a cup of white sugar as compared to a cup and a quarter of the raw turbinado, because the raw turbinado is chunkier and the crystals have lots of space in between the granules versus a white sugar that's more fine and dense. So I would start with a cup, and then once your batter is complete, taste the batter. And if you feel like, oh, this batter doesn't taste as sweet as I'd like it to, then you can add more then. You wouldn't really be able to tell at the jam state because it's obviously going to be sweet, but you'll be able to tell once the batter and all the ingredients have come together. You can give it a taste and see if it needs any additional sugar. So we're going to prep one other ingredient. It's the flax meal, and I need to grab a little bit of water for that. Let me go ahead and grab this dish with some water. I'm just using some filtered water that I have here on hand. And what I have is, again, I have like a big old deli cup of flax seeds that have already been blended down to create a flax meal. And this is what I use for baking purposes to create an egg base. So this is going to act as a binder. And there's so many different egg replacers out there in the vegan world. There's, Bob's Red Mill egg replacer, which is again for baking. It's like a flax and psyllium husk and other things in there that are binders. But then there's others that are more like trying to be a scrambled egg, because like there's no way you would add water to this and cook it and it would feel like a scrambled egg. It's impossible. This is a different purpose of an egg replacer. So there's like Just Egg, Follow Your Heart. Those are meant to be like scrambled eggs, and I use those for flan and things where like I want that kind of eggy flavor and texture. But for baking, you can absolutely use flax egg or this Bob's Red Mill egg replacer meant for baking. And I have here 3 tablespoons of our flax meal, and I'm going to add 7.5 tablespoons of water. And we're just going to let this come together. So this needs a little bit of time to really form into that like eggy texture. So we want to do that now so that by the time we finish our cake batter or close to the end of our cake batter, this is ready to go for us. So it's just like a coarse texture. And then once we add those 7.5 tablespoons of water, let me count because I don't want to lose track as I'm talking. So that's 4. All right, so there is the 7.5 of water. I'm gonna just give it a little mix and make a mess. And then right now, obviously it looks very watery, but once that flax meal starts to absorb that water, it's going to become this sort of like eggy, runny eggy texture, and that's what we're looking for. So that needs a little bit of time, just a few minutes to start to come together. So we're just gonna set that aside as we wait for our batter to start to come together. So let me just clean up my area and then start to get into the dry ingredients of our cake. Okay, and let me actually check my syrup. It's bubbling like crazy. Let's come back to this. Yeah, this is definitely, I lowered the heat significantly. This is like bubbling a little out of control here, but I can feel the bottom and it feels fine. I don't have any sticking. It didn't burn. So this is great. This is essentially what you're looking for. You can keep cooking it down if you want for a little bit, but essentially, I think you should be able to kind of see here. Let me see if I can bring the camera over a little bit more. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So you can see I still have some texture here from my strawberries, but my sugar has definitely melted down. You can see it's nice and syrupy. And if I were to run my finger across my spatula, I would be able to draw a line through there that wouldn't stick. Sorry, my dog is barking. But this is essentially what you're looking for. Again, if you wanted that nice smooth texture, you can bring a hand blender in here and blend it until it's nice and smooth so that you don't have any chunks of strawberries. So again, that's your personal preference. If you were to cook this down a little bit longer, you'll continue to break down those strawberries and you'll have less and less of the texture. But You don't need to cook this too much longer. I think this is just about there. I'm gonna leave it on really low for just another couple minutes. Let it just continue to do its thing. And then I'm gonna turn off the heat so that way it's not piping hot when I add it to my batter. All right, so that's just kind of working the last couple minutes there. We're gonna come back to the batter right now, or the dry ingredients. So I have here 2 cups of flour, and I want to talk a little bit about pouring out your flour. So if you haven't poured out your flour just yet, make sure that you have the bag and whatever you're going to be scooping it out with. Say you have a measuring cup, right? What I typically see is like, let's pretend this is my flour. People go in here and they scoop the 1 cup out of the bag, and then it's like super packed in here, and they dump it into their bowl. You want to avoid doing that. What I prefer to see is either pouring into your cup or get a spoon and scoop out some and pour the spoon by spoon into your measurement. Because what you're going to get is a nice, fluffy, airy cup versus a very compacted cup. If you add too much, you're like if you really press it in here, you're going to have too much flour and you're going to yield a really dry cake. That's how a lot of people have dry tortillas, dry cake, dry cookies, dry anything that they bake, because they're compacting too much of the measurement into the recipe. That it just doesn't call for all that amount of dry ingredients. So I have my 2 cups of flour. It calls for wheat flour. I have made this with wheat flour. However, I went to the store to buy flour and they were out of wheat flour. So I'm using an unbleached all-purpose white flour today, just because I didn't want to make a trip during COVID times to like multiple stores to track down wheat flour. I was like, I don't know what'll get me, COVID or trying, like, you know, going into multiple stores and like, or eating white flour or whatever. It just is what it is, you know? So you can use 2 cups of the flour that you have on hand. If you are doing gluten-free, I haven't tested that particular recipe out yet, but I would recommend something like an almond flour, perhaps mixed with a tiny bit of, it could be a little bit of oat flour, it could be a little bit of rice flour. I really like almond flour as more of a base. I've tried doing some baked goods with a little bit more like oat flour. And what happens is you get a little bit of this like a kind of gooiness, like it's a little bit too dense because of the way that oats kind of like stick and clump together. So oat flour is great for if you have that, if you're able to eat nuts and you're gluten-free. Now, the other dry ingredients that I have here are 1.5 teaspoons of my baking soda. So that's 1.5 teaspoons. And I have 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Now, these are my leaveners. These are going to help my cake slightly rise. This cake isn't going to be like a super poofy souffle cake, but it's going to help give it a little bit of airiness throughout. And again, we're adding like a lot of denseness with the strawberry kind of syrup or jam mixture. So that's going to kind of weigh it down. This will help kind of counterbalance that. And then I also have 3/4 teaspoons of salt. So anytime you're doing anything or making anything sweet, you want to add a little bit of salt that's going to help elevate the flavors within whatever that baked good is, or ice cream, or whatever it is. I am a huge fan of salt. It plays a very important role in the food that we make. So 3/4 teaspoons of salt being added here. The other thing I will say about your flour and other dry ingredients is if you have any clumping that is pretty evident in your flour, you can always pass your flour or your other dry goods through a fine mesh sieve or something like that and into the bowl to help break down any of the clumps that you see. So you can definitely do that. I'm going to sprinkle in all of my dry ingredients here. I'm going to just give it a little whisk just to make sure everything's well incorporated here. And then we're going to start playing with some of the wet ingredients. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my strawberry syrup now. Let me give it one last check so you can see where I'm at with this texture. So you can see here, and sorry, my dog's playing with a chew toy. So just in case you hear the little squeaking, that's her. So you can see here that I have a slightly smoother, but still textured strawberry syrup here. So this is what we're going for. I'm gonna leave the lid off, let it cool down a little bit so that we can then add it to our batter. I don't want it to be super hot going into the batter. I just want it to, you know, just be slightly warm. Obviously you can let it cool completely, but it'll start to stiffen up a little bit. So just let it cool a little bit. The other thing I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna preheat my oven to 350, just so that the oven is waiting for you and you're not waiting for the oven to warm up. So if you are baking along with me, go ahead and preheat that oven to 350 right now. All right, so we are going to get started with our wet ingredients. I'm going to add in here, let me bring these over and talk through them or talk about them. All right. And the last thing I didn't add to my strawberry mixture on the stove is my dry strawberry powder. This is 2 tablespoons and a teaspoon. So 2 tablespoons and a teaspoon. I'm gonna go ahead and throw it in there just to make sure that it kind of melts in and that I get like a really, really potent strawberry flavor in here. So that's going in. And the dehydrated strawberry could be a little like sticky, stick to your fingers, kind of, because it's sugar, it's sugary, and it's been dehydrated and there's like no moisture in here, so it definitely wants to get a little bit sticky, which is why I want to just add it in here and let it kind of like really combine with this warm mixture before adding it to my sorry about that, before adding it to my cake batter, so that it really kind of works its way into this strawberry mixture here. I might go ahead and add my whisk to this just to really get it well incorporated. All right, let me get this whisk in here. And you just want to try to get it to just fully incorporate here. I have a couple of slightly large chunks. Let me help break those down a little bit. And again, if you're seeing too much clumping, you can absolutely, again, use that hand blender or use your regular blender to just help break that down. All right, I'm gonna let that hang out for a little bit and I'll come back to it in just a moment when we get our other ingredients going. This strawberry piece is gonna come along with me to the batter now. Let's go ahead and do it. All right, so we're gonna come back to the batter here. Let's add our wet ingredients. So I'm going to start off with adding some of the like fat elements to my batter. Strawberry chunk that didn't want to escape the whisk. So something I use in place of butter all the time is applesauce, just unsweetened, regular plain applesauce, no cinnamon flavor, just regular plain applesauce. I typically have it on hand for any of the baked goods that I make. And I also poured in here, just because I ran out of like small little receptacles to put things in, I added in 2 teaspoons of vinegar. I'm using apple cider vinegar, which is what I have on hand. If you have white vinegar on hand, you can absolutely do that. So it's a 1/4 cup of applesauce with 2 teaspoons of vinegar. And that's just gonna go right in. And this is taking up the place of our butter. So it just gives it this nice kind of fluffy, airy texture that really, really replaces that butter, or so much butter needing to be present in the recipe itself. So that is going in. 1/4 cup of that applesauce with 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar or white vinegar. I also have here a 1/4 cup of just softened coconut oil. You can melt it down if you'd like. And I also included in here 1 teaspoon of that rose water that I showed you earlier. So that just 1 tablespoon of rose water is gonna really infuse a potent rose flavor throughout our entire cake. You can taste the batter again once it's all coming together and see if you want to add a little bit more rose, but I feel like 1 tablespoon is just enough to make it feel like there is definitely a rose flavor in there without overpowering the entire dish. So again, this is a quarter cup of coconut oil that's been softened with a tablespoon of rose water. So that's gonna go ahead and go in there. And then the other thing that I have here is for my liquid ingredients is I have 1 cup of just unsweetened plain almond milk. And this has been sitting out for maybe like an hour. It's still a little bit chilled, but the more that you can get it to room temp is always awesome, because if it's really cold, it's gonna solidify your coconut oil a little bit. So you wanna try to make sure it's like not super, super cold. Even if you melted your coconut oil and then you added cold almond milk to the batter, you're gonna create some hardening that's gonna happen again. So that's a cup of almond milk going in. Let me start to give that a little bit of a mix. And it's not gonna be all the moisture we need yet. Again, like the moisture that we need to complete this is definitely still in the pot because we have that strawberry mixture that needs to get in here, but just to kind of get it starting to work in. And then we are going to add another wet ingredient here. Remember our flax meal that we worked on a few minutes ago? So now you can see that it's kind of thickened. It has this kind of like clumpy, goopy kind of like scrambled egg texture. That is what we're looking for here. That is gonna go into the batter. And this is what's gonna help bind it together so that it becomes a cake, one solid cake. Not solid, but soft, but you get where I'm going. It's gonna bring it together. And then we are also going to add that 1 cup of strawberries, fresh strawberries, to our mixture here, just to have kind of a few different, I mean, these are gonna cook down obviously as it cooks in the oven, but it's just gonna add a slightly different texture than the strawberries that have been cooked down in the syrup that we have on the stove. So I'm going to bring over that syrup that I have in my pot there, and I'm going to get it all worked in here. All right. Let's see. These are the moments where I wish I had 2 whisks. Actually, I do. Let me actually grab that second one. I'm gonna whisk this real quick and then I'm gonna throw it into the pot just to try to break down any other little bits of my strawberry chunks. Let me grab my hand mixer here. You can absolutely use a hand mixer for this if you have it available to you, and bring all this batter together. The only thing is that the chunks of strawberries are gonna get in your way a little bit. Let me lower this. You can see here that I'm just whipping this all together so that I can make sure that that strawberry powder really gets worked in. All right. This is looking pretty good. It smells super good. It smells like the most potent strawberry jam you've ever had, ever. Like it's so strawberry. My whole kitchen smells like strawberry right now. All right, so I am going to take that off if I ever can. Big old chunks of strawberry, which this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that you're gonna have these like nice, luscious bits of strawberry in your cake. I love this. I love biting into something like this in a cake, but it's super stuck. Super stuck. I want all of it. There we go. Okay. Let me throw this in the sink, rinse my fingers. My oven is beeping, letting me know that it is ready for the cake when I'm ready. Now I'm going to go ahead and pour in this strawberry jam, all of it is going into my mixture or into my batter. So this is the last bit of the wet ingredients that we need to complete this cake. If you were one of the folks who were using white sugar, then you're going to mix this all together and then taste. And you should be able to definitely taste some sweetness, right? It's a cake. So even in the batter form, it should taste sweet. In fact, it might even taste a little sweeter in the batter form than it does in the final cooked cake form. All right, there we go. I'm gonna put my pot back on the stove because we're gonna use that pot twice. And we are going to make our frosting in there. So look at this color. It's gonna be a really nice pink color. Now I will say, oh, so one of the things that I sent out with the recipe that was my bad, I forgot to take it off, is as I've been testing this recipe over the last couple months, I've tried using beet powder, Jamaica, the strawberry powder, all these things to keep the cake pink, even after it's gone through the baking process. And I'm telling you that I haven't been able to find a solution to that aside from food coloring. And I don't use food coloring. So you just really can't get that pink color. You're gonna get a slightly rosy brown color, I would say, which I'm totally cool with. The flavor is gonna be there, but the color is not gonna be that super pink that you see with most strawberry cakes with like vanilla frosting. This is not that cake. It's not gonna happen here. So just giving you that FYI. And so I tried beet powder, I tried cooking beets, baking beets, raw beets, beet juice. I tried just a bunch of different stuff. And it still, when it cooks, it still turns a brown color. So it didn't work for me. Perhaps it would work if I were like baking cupcakes instead of a cake where the cook time was significantly less and it didn't cook for as much time. I might be able to keep some of that red color, but of course here I really wanted to make it a cake. Cupcakes are like so much more waste because of the individual wrappers and stuff like that. So it just wasn't what I was looking to do. So here is my cake batter. I'm really trying to, I mean, it's still gonna look a bit chunky because you have strawberry chunks in here. The flax meal has texture. You know, it's definitely like it's not like a super smooth, silky smooth batter, but you can see that it's smooth in terms of like, it's nice and runny. This is kind of the texture that you're looking for here. So any question for folks who are cooking along? Or even if you're not cooking along, absolutely feel free to ask questions if you're just taking notes too.
Hi, we were wondering if it's okay to put the syrup into the cake batter if it's still hot off the stove?
Yeah, I have done that before and it's fine, although I kind of freak out, like, is it already starting to cook it? So I just prefer to let it cool slightly. I didn't let it cool like where it's completely room temperature, but I just prefer to wait a little bit. So if you want to wait, you definitely can. But I have done that before and the cake still turned out okay. But I haven't done it enough times to know if like it's going to be okay every time. My dog really loves her new toy. Yeah. I don't know if you could hear her chewing on that. It's a little bear that she's chewing on that has a little squeaky inside. It's so cute. So I don't want to mess up her vibes, you know? Okay. So our cake batter is good to go. The only last thing that I'm going to do here is I need to, so for the cake that I made last night that I'm going to demo how to bring it all together with the frosting, it's in these 9-inch round pans. I have 2 of them. So I divided the batter in half and I baked them in these 9-inch rounds. You can do that, or you can use what I'm gonna do now. I think this is maybe like a 12 by 9 or something like that, baking dish. And I have a piece of wrapper from Miyoko's butter that I'm gonna use to go ahead and just grease the sides of the pan. Right now, I just remembered that I have to take out the frosting that I made earlier. Ooh, it's still pretty loose actually. I'm gonna drop it back into the fridge. So this has not hardened yet. It's been in the fridge for like an hour or more. Okay, so you can use a little bit of coconut oil that we had in the recipe. I have here, because I'm using butter in the frosting, I finished a bar of butter, and I'm just using the inside of the sheet to just butter or grease my baking dish. Here I'm just going to use a cake pan, just a rectangular cake pan, and I really want to make sure I get into the crevices in the corner so that way it can come out pretty easily. If you're using any pan where you can potentially put a piece of parchment paper in there, you can absolutely do that. Cut the parchment paper to size as needed, and you can put a piece of parchment paper in there and then add your cake batter. So you can see here, it looks really greasy. This is what I'm looking for here. I'm gonna toss this paper, and then I'm gonna use my spatula. These were both used for the same thing, perfect. All right, I'm gonna get rid of this whisk. Let me pan down. I'm just getting rid of this whisk, and I'm gonna pour my batter into my cake dish. And this needs to cook at 350. We all preheated our ovens to 350. So it needs to cook at 350 for 45 minutes or until you can pierce it with a fork or a knife and it comes out I will say mostly clear. Now remember that we have some chunks of moisture in here. We have whole fresh strawberries that we quartered that are in here. And we also have the strawberry bits that are in the jam. So you might pierce into something like that and see like, oh my gosh, it still looks like a little bit moist in there. So pierce it in a couple spots if you see that. And you should get something that feels like it's mostly coming out with a clean fork or a clean knife. And that's when you know it's complete. So 350 for 45 minutes to get your cake going. All right, so there is that. I have my preheated oven and I'm gonna just pop it in the oven for the 45 minutes. Make sure that you set a timer. Don't forget to do that. Make sure it's really important to set that timer. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop it in there. I like to put my baked goods on the top rack. I have a convection oven, so the air is constantly moving in there. There's fans blowing that hot air around. And I like to set it on the top rack because it's much hotter. Oh, she's just tearing up her chew toy now. So she loved it and now she's like, RIP, you know? Okay, so top oven because the heat rises and it's really hot on the top. So I'm gonna set the timer for 45 minutes and let that go. So that is working now. Now we are going to work on our frosting. Ooh.
And Jocelyn, you're baking that at 450 or 350?
350 for 45 minutes. So if you haven't preheated your oven yet and you're still getting your batter together, preheat it at 350 now. That way you don't want to put your baked goods into something that's not at temperature yet. So get it to the 350 temperature point. I like to even like have it at 350 for a few minutes, like 10 minutes or so, just to make sure it is really, really 350. The other thing I will say with home ovens, I mean all ovens really, is they could be a bit finicky. So the best way to know that you really have a 350 oven or 350 temperature is to get a thermometer in there. Now I don't have one in mine. This is a new oven, so I'm assuming that it's working properly, but especially if you have an old oven, sometimes your dial on the surface will say that it's 350, but then you're like, why are my things not baking properly? And it's really because your oven might need to get recalibrated. So if you have a thermometer hanging on one of the racks, it'll tell you the true temperatures. At the kitchen that we were at for Todo Verde, sometimes the ovens would say 350, but it would read like 275, you know? So you're not at the proper temperature. So then it's hard to say it's gonna cook at exactly 45 minutes for all ovens. It's like pretty common to have your ovens off temperature actually. So just something to keep in mind. Maybe you want to get an oven thermometer for the future if you really like baking. People have been really into baking right now during quarantine too. So let's get into our frosting. I'm like sweating a little bit of bullets right now because I made a frosting batch this morning, like I mentioned, and it's still so loose in my fridge right now. And I'm like, oh, I better be ready by the time that we're ready to frost this cake. So keeping my fingers crossed. I think we have like 25 more minutes before class ends. So everybody, fingers crossed that works out. Okay, so for our frosting, here we go. I'm gonna pan down to the ingredients we have here. It's super simple. It's like pretty much like a spin off of what we've already done in the cake itself, very strawberry centric. So initially when I was testing this recipe, I was gonna do a chocolate frosting because I love chocolate. So I was like, oh, strawberry rose, like a chocolate covered strawberry, but the strawberry is infused with rose. Like, OMG, that'll be so delicious. And I tried so many different chocolate frostings. One was like not that great. One was overpowering it. And then I was like, you know what? I think I want to do a strawberry frosting because the cake itself, because I couldn't get that pink color that I was hoping for, then the frosting is going to do that for us. The frosting is going to give it that kind of vibrant, nice pink feel to it that we couldn't get in the cake itself. So, and then also it's confusing if it's like chocolate frosting, but you go into it and it's like this kind of pinkish brown cake. So I just figured strawberry all around, why not? All right, so I have 1 cup of strawberries that again have just been quartered, and I'm gonna drop this into that same pot that we used earlier. So I'm gonna just throw that right in. And then I have more sugar, right? Because frosting requires a good amount of sugar as well. So I have 3/4 cups of sugar that are gonna go into this pot. So it's just strawberries and sugar. And I'm gonna turn on the heat and we're gonna let this cook down. So we're gonna let this cook down. Similar to what we did the first round. I swear next time I make this, I need to measure out. I guess I can measure out like what this ends up being, the strawberries to sugar at the end, once it's cooked down, how much that ends up being, like 1 cup, 1.25 cups, because then you can do it together and then you can measure out 1.25 cups. The other ingredients that we're gonna be using are again, this strawberry powder. I have here 2 tablespoons of that strawberry powder that are gonna go in. And I see a question here, how much sugar, frosting, how much sugar in the pot? It was 3/4 cups of that raw turbinado sugar. So I have 1 cup of strawberries to 3/4 cups of sugar in there. And I can hear it starting to kind of sizzle right now. Again, I turned it up to like a medium, low heat. You wanna start kind of like medium, in between, I don't know why I say medium of the medium, in between like your low and medium, and kind of see how it starts to cook down. And if you need to turn up the dial, you can, or if you need to bring it down, you can as well too. And we're going to add 2 tablespoons of this strawberry powder to that once it's cooked down. So this is what I did this morning, is that I tried to throw everything in the pot together and it didn't work out. Let that do its job first. And then we're gonna add that 2 tablespoons of strawberry powder. And then we're gonna add 2 fat components. So I know for the cake, we added the applesauce in place of the butter, but for frosting, you can't really get around the butter. I've made frosting a variety of different ways. I've made frosting with coconut cream, with the fat that separates if you chill a can of coconut cream. I have made frosting with soaking cashews and blending them and adding coconut oil. So essentially I'm kind of creating my own butter. You can definitely do all of those things. But in this particular case, I'm just gonna go ahead and use vegan butter. I'm using Miyoko's. That's my personal preference of vegan butters out there. You can absolutely use Earth Balance. There's so many new ones. Galicia has a new one. There's tons of new ones out there. Whatever your favorite is, you can absolutely use that. So let's see. I see a question in here. Let me see if there's any other questions in here. Sarah, is there anything I need to be covering right now?
Just from Rachel, she's asking, can I use all butter for the frosting, not vegan, just using real butter?
I don't know. I've never made this with real butter. So I think you can, but I wouldn't know because I don't use real butter. So hopefully it works out. I mean, let me know how it goes. So it's like, it's so close to being vegan, you know? The other thing I will say is you can also go with, if you do have cashews, if you wanted to try to keep it vegan, you could soak some cashews, maybe about a 1/4 cup to 1/3 of a cup or so, drain them, and then blend them up with some of the coconut oil. And that will also kind of give you a little bit of this like butter consistency. So I have here a 1/2 cup of vegan butter with a 1/4 cup of coconut oil. Now, one thing I didn't say earlier about coconut oil, especially if you're new to using coconut oil in these types of recipes, is you absolutely need to make sure that you use refined coconut oil. Now, if you already started using virgin coconut oil, you can move forward with it. But I will say that what refined coconut oil does, I'm like, my dog is eating, so hold on one second. You need to go in here, little lady. Let's go in here. Right here. There we go. Good girl. My dog was eating out of my planter and chewing on something, so I just had to stop that. We just got a dog about a month ago, and she's still acclimating and trying to figure it out. And yeah, so sorry about that. So for the coconut oil, make sure it's refined. If you're using virgin coconut oil, what's going to happen is that your cake, your frosting, everything is going to taste like coconut. If you use refined coconut oil, you're just using essentially like the fattiness, the saturated fat essentially that's in coconut. That's what you're using as an ingredient, but you're not, the refinement pretty much eliminates that coconut flavor from that ingredient. So anytime that I use coconut oil, it's always, I like rarely, I don't even think I own a bottle of virgin coconut oil. I only work with refined coconut oil, and I don't use coconut oil a lot to begin with because it is a saturated fat, which means, you know, when you have it out at room temperature, it's still hard. It's, you know, it's something that's like not good for us to consume on a regular basis, but I do use it for baked goods. I do use it for a few recipes that do need it to do that, to like solidify slightly in the refrigeration or whatever it may be. So again, refined. Go ahead.
Do you have any suggestions for what we can use if we don't have vegan butter or cashews?
If you don't have vegan butter or cashews, but you do have coconut oil, you can definitely use a coconut oil. If you have any coconut cream, that could potentially work too. What I might do if I were in that situation, now this is just me being a chef and not a pastry chef, because for me, I'm like, oh yeah, like maybe you can add more strawberries and like thicken your jam. Like, so once you kind of start to melt down your strawberry sugar mixture, like add more strawberries, get it like really thick, and then add coconut oil, and the coconut oil is going to help it kind of set a little bit. I would say that could potentially work. Or you can also add a little bit of, if you have a coconut cream can and you put it in the fridge. Now this is going to take time. You put it in the fridge for at least a couple hours until it's chilled. And what's going to happen is in the can, you're going to create separation with the cold temperature. The fat of the coconut is going to rise to the top, and the milk or the liquidiness is going to go to the bottom. And when you open up the top of that can, you're just going to scoop out like the most thick, luscious fattiness of that coconut, the coconut cream. And you can add a little bit of that coconut cream to your strawberry coconut oil and your strawberry jam. I think I said strawberry already. So your strawberry jam and the coconut oil. and that can create kind of like a luscious consistency. Now you need to make sure that you chill that again. So right now we're making this hot mixture to melt down the strawberries and melt down the sugar and to combine the butter and the oil, the coconut oil and the strawberry powder. But it needs to cool down before you can spread it on a cake. And then additionally, the cake itself needs to cool down. So we're not going to be able to even coat the cake with frosting until it's pretty much room temperature. Because then what will happen is if you're like trying to coat it with like this luscious creamy frosting and it's hot, it's going to melt. It's going to melt into the cake and it's not going to serve its purpose. It's going to be kind of like liquidy and runny. So you need to make sure that it's absolutely not chilled, but room temperature so that you can add the frosting to it. So this is still going to take a few hours, folks. It's not going to be a really fast process.
And should we melt or soften the vegan butter and coconut oil for the frosting?
It's going to do that right now. So once we have the strawberry sugar mixture complete, we're going to add the vegan butter and the coconut oil to that pot with the heat turned off, and that's going to melt the ingredients into each other. So that is going to happen. You don't need to do that as an additional step. So it's going to happen in just a few moments. I'm just trying to break up any clumps of my strawberry. I don't know why this is so clumpy for me today. I don't know if folks, if it's clumpy for you. Maybe I feel like there's a bit of moisture in the air here in my house. So it feels a little humid and it's like kind of clumping up a little bit. So let me check on my strawberry syrup here. So what you're looking for is, again, for these sugar, like I could still see some of those sugar crystals. You see that on my spatula there, all those little clumps, those are still the granules of the sugar. Even as I scrape down the bottom of my pot, I can see some of those sugar granules. So this still has a little bit more time that it needs to really melt all the way down. And then for this one, I don't want to see any of these strawberry chunks in there. So you could do this now, or you could do this towards the end, but you could pop this in a blender if you'd like, or I'm just gonna use the same hand blender that I used earlier with the whisk attachment on it to just blend up those strawberry chunks and make sure that they're a lot smaller, because that's not gonna work well for a frosting, right? It's going to, like you can't really smooth over a big old chunk of strawberry that's like floating in the mixture. So I have a hand blender attachment that I'm gonna add here. And in a couple minutes, I'll go ahead and blend that so that it's as smooth as possible. It doesn't have to be super, super smooth, like creamy smooth. There's gonna be a little bit of texture in that, and I like that. And as you saw in the photo that we posted on Instagram, if you did see that photo, there's a little bit of texture in there. You can see like little bits of strawberry in there. You can see some of the little pieces of like the strawberry powder in there, like maybe slightly little bits that didn't break down all the way into a powder. And I'm totally okay with that. I love texture. So I think that it's cool to also see what you're eating versus it just being like a color, a smooth color. So I'm okay with that, but you don't want any large chunks. So let me go ahead and throw this blender in here, and let me move my spatula aside. And all I'm gonna do is essentially just turn this on really low because I don't want to splatter myself. Because it's really hot. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, since it's so hot, you can wait until it cools slightly. But I'm just breaking down these strawberry chunks. And of course, you can always throw this in the blender. If you do put this in the blender and it's hot, just make sure that you remove the center plastic piece in the center of your blender lid, your blender cup lid, and you can place a towel over that hole. And that's essentially going to allow your mixture to breathe as you blend it. If you don't do that, sometimes the extreme heat and the blending process can create a little bit of a mini explosion, splattering explosion of hot liquid. You don't want that. I've had that happen to me in the past. It's not fun. So just make sure that you're being extra cautious. All right, so there you go. Nice, smooth strawberry mixture. I have a few little bits of strawberry in there that are not all the way broken down, but that is, I'm cool with that. That's much better than a huge quartered chunk of strawberry. So I'm going to check to see if I still see any of those sugar granules in there. And if I don't, I'll go ahead and turn off the heat and I'll start to add my butter, my oil, my strawberry, powdered strawberry mixture. I think I'm good. I think I don't see any more granules of sugar. I think it's all melted in there. And again, you can see here, maybe those appear to be bubbles to me, not granules of sugar. Yeah, we're all melted here. So I'm going to turn off my heat. I'm gonna just get the powdered strawberry in here and work on mixing that in. I actually might still use that immersion blender if I have these chunks in here. Let's see here. Yeah, see mine, for whatever reason, it's like the powder got really clumpy on me. So I am gonna use my immersion blender here just to make sure that gets all worked in and blend it into this mixture. All right, here we go. Because I think if I just do this, it is going to stay pretty clumpy. Yeah, it is. All right, let me use my little blender here. All right, any questions coming in? Are we all good so far? I'm gonna turn up my dial slightly. Just try to get that as well incorporated as possible. I'm gonna turn it up even higher for this last little bit. All right, there we go. That is looking pretty good to me. Perfect. And my heat is turned off. So that was just a matter of making sure my dehydrated or freeze-dried strawberry wasn't hanging out in huge clumps in here. All right, so that is good to go. Now I'm gonna drop in my coconut oil. This is again, that refined coconut oil, and my vegan butter. That's all getting dropped in here. There we go. And I'm going to just mix that in. You can just use a spatula for this. You don't need to blend this really because it's gonna melt. It's gonna melt into this. Again, my heat is turned off. I don't need to boil this. I've made this frosting so many times, and then this morning was like, oh, I'm gonna try this new way. And that didn't really work out. So you don't really need to boil this at all. You just need to melt it down until it's nice and smooth and luscious. And then it will be ready to go in the fridge, or I would say put it in the fridge. I think that I've always put it in the fridge after I've made this. You can try to leave it out room temperature if your kitchen is a little bit cold, but because your oven's on, it's probably not that cold actually. So just add it to the fridge and let it get nice and chilled. It'll solidify again because it has the butter and the coconut oil in there. And then what I would do is let that then, if it's really hard, let it sit on your counter before you decide to frost your cake. Let it sit on the counter until it softens up slightly. So you don't want it to be this soft. This is too soft. This is not frosting consistency. But what I mean is something that's sort of in between this and a hard butter, right? So you want something that's spreadable, that definitely has that frosting consistency. So this is what you're looking for when it's in the pot. Add it to a bowl, or you can add this pot to your fridge if you want to, if you don't want to dirty another thing. If you do and you have glass shelves, make sure you put a little towel under this so that you don't end up breaking any glass from the temperature changes in your fridge. So here is our frosting. You can give it a taste. It should feel very much like strawberry. Nice and sweet, nice and luscious because of that fat consistency of the coconut oil and the vegan butter. If you were using the virgin coconut oil, because that's all you had on hand, then you would definitely feel also a strong flavor of coconut coming through. So I didn't want that for this cake. I just want the strawberry to come through, which is why I'm just leaving it this way. If you wanted to add a little bit of that rose consistency to the frosting, I'm gonna be adding dried rose petals that I showed you at the beginning of the class to the top of my cake. So I'm going to add that rose flavor in that form. If you don't have the dried rose petals, perhaps you can add a very small amount, because obviously this is not that whole cake batter that we had earlier. So you can probably make do with about a ½ teaspoon to a teaspoon of rose water in here. You don't want to add too much water because that's gonna, you want this to get nice and hard and thickened, right? But you can give it a taste and see if it has enough of that rose essence. Again, it's just an essence of rose. It's not an overpowering flavor of rose. So the strawberry should definitely be more powerful than the rose flavor. However, you should still be able to notice that there's rose in there. So this will get transferred to the refrigerator and let it chill until it's pretty much gotten in to be almost like a stick of butter again, and then let it soften until it's ready to coat a cake. So I'm gonna come back here and I'm gonna bring over the cake that I baked last night, and I'm gonna take it out of the containers, and I'm gonna check. We all kept our fingers crossed to see if I know I saw fingers go up right now, to see if it's ready to be frosted. I have a feeling it's not. Let's see. Oh, actually, let me show you. I'm just gonna use a butter knife. The edges are kind of stiffened up, but the center is still pretty, yeah, this didn't gel up as much as I need it to. So this still needs a little bit more time in the fridge before I'm able to frost. But let me just show you a couple differences here, because this is the one that I told you that I made a little bit of a mistake on. It's actually not too bad. But one thing that I noticed that's different from this and this is the color. Let me show you here. I like to show my mistakes as much as I like to show the awesome finished product, because then I could be like, don't let this happen to you. Okay, so check out this color to this color. This is like almost a brown. This is kind of similar to the color that's gonna come about of our cake. It's like a pinkish brown color. And then notice this color is like a more vibrant, beautiful red. So this was done correctly right now together. And this one was me trying to do a shortcut that I thought was possible. So, you know, and you can see that it's starting to become, actually it's not too bad. Like I'll be able to run this over my cake, but I would prefer for it to be a little bit more. Actually, it's not too bad. It's a little bit of a frosting. It's a little bit too loose for me. It needs to be chilled just a bit more. But this is not the color. And this is because I cooked the butter and I cooked the coconut oil and I cooked the strawberry. Actually, it's starting to turn a little bit of this pinkish color now. Interesting. Again, not a baker. Very interesting to me, this whole process. Okay. So here is the frosting. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a shot because why not? We're all here together and we're supposed to finish making a cake together. So let's do it. Worst case scenario, what I'll do is I'll put the cake into my fridge, all of it, and just let it come together. So I have my 2 rounds of cake. You can see here that the outside is like this brownish color. It has like a slight pinkish hue to it. I don't know if you can tell from there. And then it has, here I cut off a little bit just to taste it because this is gonna get covered and with frosting. But you can see here like a little chunk of strawberry in there. Like that, whoever gets that bite, it's gonna be so good. So I'm going to grab another butter knife. And you just want to run your knife around the edge of the baking dish. I also like to just kind of tuck in my knife and like just lift a little, like I'm just lifting a tiny little bit. I'm just trying to create a separation from the bottom of the baking dish. And I don't want to do it enough where like I'm starting to break it and crack it, but just enough where when I flip this over, hopefully it will come out pretty easily. There we go. Ta-da. So here is 1/2 of our cake going on to just a regular plate. Again, because I'm not a baker, I don't have like specific like plating dishes. This is just like a regular plate that I eat off of. One thing you could do for frosting, just to keep it neat, is if you have any parchment paper, I have here some wax paper that I use to make tortillas. Here's a little trick that you could do. I might cut these in half just to save a little bit of paper actually. So you can do this. You can just lift up, let me pan down a little bit further. You can just lift up slightly and stick this in here. Lift up and stick this in here. And so what's gonna happen is as you're dropping frosting on the side of your plate, it's gonna all land on this little wax paper or parchment paper. And then once you're finished frosting the cake, you're going to just pull these papers out and it's going to leave a clean dish underneath. So there's a little trick for you. Stolen from all my years that I was watching Food Network growing up as a kid, you know? Even though I don't use it on a regular basis, but just little fun tricks that I think are super cool and so easy, like foolproof, you know? So there is 1/2 of our cake. Check out my frosting. It's actually now a pinkish color. Look, check this out. So I've just kind of kept mixing it to kind of emulsify and it kind of worked out. I see little bits of my strawberry in here. If you have an offset spatula, that's much better than this butter knife that I'm using right now. An offset spatula is definitely gonna, I see little bits of butter in here and that happened because as it was chilling in the fridge, some separation happened and the butter got colder faster than the other elements. But it's gonna be totally fine in here. You can absolutely mix this down again if you'd like to. You can use that hand mixer or hand blender or whatever you have handy. I want to add a good amount to this bottom layer in between. This is going to be what's filling in between the 2 cake layers. And then I obviously need to frost the sides a little bit. So what I like to do is just like add a bit to the top, right? Kind of hanging over the edge. And then it's okay if you make a little bit of a mess because you have that paper down, that wax paper, that parchment paper to help you clean up the mess afterwards. So you can do a little bit there. It's a little bit of a messy process. And like I said, I don't have an offset spatula, but that kind of helps you to be able to smooth over a little bit easier. There's certain tools that bakers have that are perfect for these types of things. All right. Can I answer any questions as I'm frosting this cake? Is everybody doing okay so far? Everyone's like, we're great. We are excited for our cake. Okay. So I am going to add more to the sides when I add that second layer. So again, I'm just gonna go around. If you had the rectangle one, like the one that's baking for me, you would do the same thing. Then you're gonna go around and just create a little bit of this air gap in between the bottom. So I'm just going through and I'm just gently lifting just enough to create a little bit of that separation. I'm not trying to stick the knife underneath. I'm just kind of nudging it like, hey, it's okay. It's gonna be fine. You're gonna come out really easily, and then boom, it comes out so easily. You can see all these bits of strawberry here. That's gonna go right over the other layer. Perfect. And then I'm going to add all the rest of my frosting here and spread it out. Right, there we go. I have more here that'll be for that side. And then once this is all frosted to your liking, you are going to use anything that you'd like to garnish it. Ooh, here's a big chunk of butter. I'm actually going to take that off. You can, if you do have extra strawberries, absolutely use strawberries to garnish it. I sometimes just add a few strawberries only at the center top as just like a cute garnish. You can absolutely add lots of strawberries. Like you can even create like a compote if you wanted to, like chop up some strawberries, add a little bit of sugar to it. You can even add, you know, the rose petals to that compote and then pile it on top. So it's like nice and juicy. That's an option. You can also, if you don't have strawberries or rose petals, one time I made this cake and I added cacao nibs to the top because again, like I said, strawberries, chocolate just go so well together. So you can add that and it adds like a little element of crunch to it and a nice bitterness that I think goes really well with the sweetness of this cake. I like to really balance like salty, sweet, bitter versus, you know, some folks just really love sweet. Like they're fine with just like a big hit of sugar. That's totally fine. Whereas for me, I get tired of so much sweetness in one bite. Like I need something to kind of offset it. So like when I eat this cake, I'm probably gonna have unsweetened hot tea with it. So just because it's gonna be sweet and I need something to just be like, oh, this is why I'm not a baker. Because like I like sweets to a certain extent, but sometimes the sugar is just like too much for me. I like salty. Salty, pungent, bitter. That's my vibe. Spicy, which is why a lot of times, this one is not spicy, but a lot of times when you see me making sweets for these classes, they typically have a little bit of chile in them. Okay. So I'm kind of rushing through, not the cutest cake ever, but it's gonna look a little bit cuter once I remove the wax paper underneath. And then of course, if your frosting was still a little bit not as set like mine was, you can just pop this in the fridge before you're ready to serve it. Everyone's so quiet today, no questions? Everyone's good? My computer's panned down, so I keep looking up like, did I drop off the call?
My cake is ready, so I just need to wait for the frosting to cool, both to cool down.
Yeah. So wait until it's like about room temp. What I do is I just put the cake on my stove and just let it hang out. Or if you want it to cool down faster, you can set it on your counter. Like put a towel, not a towel, maybe like a cutting board or something, because a towel will help hold the heat there. but a cutting board, because it's wood, will hopefully let go of some of that temperature, because your stove and your oven is going to be hot for a while. So if you keep the cake on the stove, it's going to stay hot as long as it takes your oven to cool down back to room temperature. All right, so let's say that I keep spending another however many minutes to keep frosting this and make it look super nice and it looks super beautiful. There we go. All right, there we go. This looks okay. I'm gonna just do this to kind of get the top somewhat smoothed out. And then I'm going to go ahead and let me wash my hands. Actually, I'm gonna add those strawberry wedges and the rose petals to the top. Okay, so let me get some of these dried rose petals. And just, you can sprinkle them decoratively if you wanted to, like if you wanted to just focus on like a ring, because that's still gonna get onto every slice, right? Everybody's gonna cut into it, into slices. So you can definitely say that they're gonna get more of the rose towards the outer edge or the crust of the cake, or you can definitely go all the way across. Whatever, this is like your art piece. So whatever feels best for you. You can also even try to frost the sides if you wanted to, or sorry, not frost, but put rose petals on the sides of the cake, which is like a little bit harder. You have to kind of like pat them in, but that's totally possible too.
It's looking so beautiful.
Awesome, yay. Okay, good. I was like starting to feel a little skeptical here, but it's looking pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I am going to just grab a couple of strawberries that I reserved earlier. And I'm just gonna cut them with the greens on, just in half. Let me cut those here. And this turned off, I believe. Here we go. Okay. And then you can just either put, you know, halves of strawberries. I like to do cut side up with the greens on. You can, you know, like I said, do a compo. You can do whatever it is that you'd like. You can candy the strawberries or cover them in a little bit of like sugar syrup, you know, which is kind of what you see for the fruit tarts that a lot of people get at bakeries. So I'm just going to remove my paper here, and you can see all that the paper caught so that it doesn't end up on my plate. There we go. So it looks like I did a really clean job on my frosting here. There we go. And there is the final cake. So you can see, came out pretty okay. Awesome, I love the little hearts, yay. Awesome, so let me know how it ends up coming out for all of you. I'm gonna take a slice while we're here for, I know we're already over time, but if you wanna hang out, I'm gonna take a chunk out so you can see what the inside looks like. And then we are done. So I am going to grab a plate. And then I'm going to get a sharper knife. The butter knife might just smash down. Get a little knife here. I'm gonna just cut a little slice, just so you can check it out. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is just cut a little baby slice here. I'm not gonna get a big old chunk of strawberry, but just so you can kind of start to see what the texture looks like. And again, I would let this set a little bit. My frosting is a little bit soft still, but I'm sure it tastes good. So I have a little slice there, and I'm gonna get into the bottom. You can see that it has like that brown color that I was mentioning, right? Like it's not quite the pink because I didn't use food coloring. If you have red food coloring and you used it, go for it. But as far as I know, food coloring is typically not vegan because they use, it's made from a bug that when it's crushed, it creates this like really potent red color. So usually red velvet cake and all those things, it has a bug in it to make it red. So it's not vegan, but here we go. Ooh, I can see like a nice chunk of strawberry right there. See, I'm down with that. Those like weird, odd chunks. That looks so good. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a piece, give it a taste. You can see there. You can see that it's nice and dense. Some of the frosting, because it's a little bit not all the way set, like I mentioned, like it's still a little bit loose. It kind of seeped into the top of the cake a little bit, but I'm still totally okay with that. It definitely tastes like Amorcito. Strawberry rose, the only thing that's missing is chia seeds. That would actually make it like an Amorcito cake if I sprinkled chia seeds over the top, because it's strawberry rose, chia seeds. We didn't use maple syrup, but still tastes pretty damn good. So there's our cake.